Hi everybody. Again, this is John Herrera with CitySpeak podcast, episode 2. So nice that you could tune in and join us today. The podcast for today is for municipal employees, how to survive and thrive during this crisis. So let's get started here. Just want to go through a couple of maybe some helpful points to help you navigate the time that we're living in today. City employees, special districts, other local government employees are currently very concerned about this crisis and what it could mean for our jobs and job security and so forth. And so let's just jump into it. And I hope there's something helpful here for all of you. I'm basically going to be looking at 3 different time periods to help us as municipal employees to survive and thrive during this crisis, to turn the bad stress into good stress. And I'll explain more as we talk. But we're going to look at, number 1, where we've been as municipal employees, as an industry, as an economy. And then secondly, where we are today. And then thirdly, where we're headed. So let's just jump into this. I want to give you a little recap. First of all, you have to be over 10 years old to really say that you have experienced an economic recession. And of course, all of us have experienced at least one, the Great Recession of 2007 to 2009. But you know, there's a saying about how do you know you're in an economic recession? Do you have to go to the economists or government agencies to find out? Well, I like what our president, Harry S. Truman, some 70 years ago, he said, you know when you're in an economic recession when your neighbor's out of work, but you're in an economic depression when you're out of work. Isn't that an interesting explanation of when you know that you're in a recession or a depression? It all really has to do with jobs, and do you have a job? But let me quickly go through the last 6 economic downturns, recessions that I've lived through, and briefly hope this is of value to you, although you're mostly familiar with it. In 1969, we went through a recession that lasted 11 months. The unemployment rate got to 5.9%. And this recession was caused by inflation and tight monetary policies from the Federal Reserve Bank. In 1973, there was another recession. That one lasted 16 months. The unemployment rate got to 8.6%. And this was caused by an oil crisis. Remember OPEC and so forth. And also all the spending by the federal government in the Vietnam War kind of came to haunt us at that time. In 1980, I graduated high school in 1981, but 1980, 1982, there was a recession that lasted 22 months. The unemployment rate was at 7.8%, and this was also caused by energy crisis. The inflation rate hit 11.1%. That's over 5 times what the inflation rate is today. And there was a lot of politics that got involved in that as well. 10 years later, in 1990, there was another economic recession. It lasted 8 months. The unemployment rate got to 6.8%, and this recession was during the Gulf War. Oil prices, a lot of globalization issues that caused this recession. 10 years later, after that, in 2001, another recession. This was 8 months long. Unemployment rate hit 5.5%, and this obviously was caused by 9/11. Remember that happened September 11, 2001. There was the dot-com bubble. Remember that issue that happened, and Enron, and all of the accounting scandals that really brought down the credibility of the accounting profession. That was in recession of 2001. And then about 6 or 7 years later, between 2007 and 2009, we experienced what was known as the Great Recession. That recession lasted 18 months. the unemployment rate hit 10%. And as you know, this was caused by the housing bubble due to very relaxed mortgage lending and other creative financing that was developed. Today is my 7th recession in 2020 caused by COVID-19. We'll talk about that in the next section, but this is where we've been. These are the 6 recessions that I've lived through. How many have you all lived through? Regardless, recessions, if you're working, can cause a lot of worry and a lot of stress for a lot of municipal employees. But my point is, looking at where we've been and the recessions, you realize that this is not our first rodeo. We've done this before. So if you're over 20 years old, you might know what a financial crisis, what an economic recession feels like. And those of you that are old enough that have had bills to pay and rent or mortgage or other cost of living, you know how stressful it can be during an economic downturn and the insecurity that's caused by all of this. So as I said, the economy. What is the economy? How do we define it? How do we measure it? In the end, we're all just concerned about our jobs. If we don't have a job, we don't have income. I wrote an article separately on our blog, on our munitemps.com website blog, and I titled that article, "A Job is More Valuable Than Money." To earn the equivalent amount of earnings or income from interest earnings, you need over $3.8 million today in the bank or in various banks to be able to earn the equivalent salary of a $50,000 annual salary job. So if you have a job that pays $50,000, you need $3.8 million in the bank to earn under current interest rates. As you all know, interest rates are very low. That's something to think about. If you have a job, you have to hold on to it. What did the recessions feel like back during those? I started working in city government in 1990. So for the last 30 years, there was at least 3 recessions. This is the 4th recession during my career. But the 3 recessions, 1990, the year 2000, the year 2007, 2008, these were very dark, cloudy times at City Hall and various local government offices. I remember back in 1991, 92, 93, the early 90s, in California, there was the ERAF, and which stood for Educational Revenue Augmentation Fund. It was a way to divert monies away from local governments, city governments, to the state of California to fund the schools. Very good idea, of course, but nonetheless, took a lot of money out of the redevelopment money that was available that indirectly benefited the city's general fund. But I remember still what it was like. 1992, 93. I remember being in meetings with a city manager. Well, actually, the city manager will call meetings of the as many employees as he can get off to come in and attend these meetings where he would talk about what the budget scenario looked like. And these were very stressful times for most city employees. I remember that everybody would wonder, am I going to have a job? This is midway through the fiscal year 1992, 93. And the city manager would talk about how difficult the general fund revenue was, the picture was looking like for the fiscal year. And during that time, as we were preparing the budget for the new fiscal year 1993, it didn't look good. And there were going to be layoffs. I still remember how the individuals that were to be notified that they would not have a job, that would occur by whether or not, when the budget document was printed, if your name was included. I remember in the personnel salaries budget included the names and titles and salaries of every employee. except for police department. I don't think theirs was included, but once you got a copy of the budget on right after July 1st, if your name was not in the budget, you were not going to have a job. And that was very stressful back then. I remember being around the city. I worked at the city of Hemet at that time, and I remember this was during March and April. The city had its print shop in a house that it had purchased to use as a print shop, and it had a swimming pool, and a few of us were able to get away and go swimming in the pool. And I remember sitting in the pool there, and it was myself. I was the administrative analyst at that time, and there was a couple of building officials and a guy from the fire department. And they started talking about the budget and sort of, trying to see, predicting what was going to happen in the budget. And the guys from the building department would say, well, we're funded. I mean, we have building fees and it pays for our costs. Plus, I think it's very important. And the building guys would tell the fire department, you guys are all supported by taxes. You guys are subsidized by property taxes. You guys don't have a funding source. So therefore, you guys should the cuts in the budget to balance the budget should come from public safety. And of course, I stayed quiet, right? Because these public safety guys or the guys from building and safety, they didn't think the accountant was a very essential position. So or finance. I was in the finance department at the time, so I stayed quiet. But very interesting to hear different city employees from different departments talking about, like, well, we have our own funding, or we're more essential, or we're a greater priority for the city council. And this was, again, very stressful time. There was, I remember in 1994-95, when I moved from my job at the city of Hemet as an administrative analyst, I moved over to the city of San Jacinto as the finance director. Boy, there was a big fiasco there with the Mello-Roos bonds, with the community facility district, the CFDs that were formed, and how many of the property owners were protesting that their tax bills were going up when their property values were going down. And some people would blow up copies of their property tax bill and they'd paste it to cover the entire garage door in their house. And I remember they'd come in and they'd yell at me, and as a finance director, and say, we're not going to pay our Mello-Roos taxes. I'm only going to pay the property tax, regular property tax, but I'm not going to pay the Mello-Roos tax. And of course, we had some $26 million of Mello-Roos bonds that went into default because the property owners were not paying them. It was so tough back then. I remember preparing the budget, the city of San Jacinto, fiscal year 1994-95, and it was maybe a $15 million general fund budget. And I had council members that would want to know, is the fund balance $158,000 or $155,000? And those $3,000 were that significant. Very stressful. I mean, trying to go through that budget process and reconciling every iteration of the budget that we went through. All the employees calling me, asking, John, is my department going to be affected? And it was a very stressful time. And I remember that recession that happened in 1990, 1991. Keep in mind, the Bureau of Labor Statistics and other economic reporting agencies of the U.S. government may say that the recession was from 2000 to 2001, but there's always a lag time before it hits city governments in California. City governments, as they say, are always the last to feel the effects of the recession and the last to get out of the recession. So we really started feeling the effects of the recession in city government all the way through 1993, 94, even 95. What happened during 2007, 2008, 2009, same thing, huge declines in the sales tax and the hotel tax and even property taxes tends to be very stable. Eventually, after a year or two, you start seeing the declines in the assessed values. And with that goes the threat to municipal employees of whether or not they're going to lose their jobs. The focus on employee pensions, employee benefits, employee salaries, there's like a big light that's put on the personnel budget. In most cities and municipalities, salaries are a big part of the general fund budget. So where we've been, recessions, they've been stressful. For those of you that have not lived through the 1969, 1973, 1980, 1990, 2001, 2007 recession, as you look into the year 2020 recession, you may not know what to expect. But don't get stressed out. We'll talk about it a little more in the next section. The point is that we all had to work harder to keep our jobs. Whether you were management on a salary or whether you were non-management hourly, you had to work more. Everybody's position was on the chopping block. Anything that was not essential, anything that was viewed as not being part of the mission critical part of the city or other municipality was on the chopping block during these recessions. Police and fire is always the number one priority in most communities, and therefore they're in a whole different area. I'm really talking more to city manager's office, city clerk, finance, human resources, community development, building, planning, public works, engineering, library services, parks and recreation, community services, and on and on. Those are the departments, every one of them. You know, when you're looking at cuts that are going to happen, everybody's looking at and saying, well, parks and recreation, they're not essential. Well, they are essential to the seniors and the youth and other people that get these after-school programs and other activities, and obviously to the employees, the city employees that work in those departments. Where you look over at finance, you're saying, well, we don't need to have 4 accountants here. Can't 2 do it? And everybody starts pointing fingers. At least that happened during my experience when I was working with cities during the recession of 1990, 2001, 2007, 2008. But the point is that we all had to work harder. I remember I was working 50 to 60 hours every week, and it was starting to burn me out. It was a very, very hard time, but you had to do whatever it took back then. Especially when I was new in my career, in my finance director track and trying to prove myself. Non-management employees as well, they had to work extra hours and the benefits weren't always there. So that's where we've been. That's recessions, right? And I'm sure there's a lot of you that are listening that can share more experiences on how difficult recessions are and the impact they have on municipal employees that are all watching the budget for whether or not their budget's going to, their job is going to be affected. But here's where we are. We looked at where we were, where we've been. Now let's talk about where we are. Today we have something called COVID-19, coronavirus. We've not seen anything like this in 100 years. I didn't think I'd ever see this in my lifetime. Some 200,000 people in America have died because of this virus, and about 1 million people worldwide have died. This is sad. The unemployment rate is 8.4%. If this is according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics across the United States, 8.4%. But that unemployment rate is going to be either higher or higher, depending on who you ask. In California, I know the rate is over 11%, and different states are a little higher, a little lower than that. The $600 weekly unemployment check is gone. And whether there's going to be another round of stimulus and unemployment is still up in the air and being debated in the halls of Congress. Here's another thing to be aware of. The national debt at the end of August, so this was a month ago, stood at $26.7 trillion. Almost $27 trillion. That number is just mind-boggling. Most of us cannot relate to it, but I'll put it in these terms for all of you. Every one of you that's watching this video or listening to this audio recording in this podcast, every one of you, your household has to pay back over $200,000 of this $26.7 trillion national debt. That's amazing. That's like somebody comes from Mexico or Canada or Europe, or somebody wants to become an American citizen. Part of their swearing in ceremony should include the statements, do you recognize that you will have to assume $207,000 of debt to become an American citizen? If you're going to be a working adult, you're going to have to cover this cost. If you're paying taxes, if you're through a number of different ways, mostly taxes, you're going to pay back your share, which is over $200,000 of this $26.7 trillion. This is amazing. This is mind-boggling. Never have we experienced this much amount of debt. But that should tell you how important, how significant, how dangerous this COVID-19 recession really is. The Federal Reserve Bank, Jerome Powell, has said something that I never thought I'd see the chairman of the Federal Reserve Bank ever say. We're going to keep rates at zero indefinitely for now. And they're benchmarking it to inflation. They're redefining the rules here, guys. They're redefining the rules. The economists in the Federal Reserve Bank, through the monetary policy tools that they have, and the federal government through the fiscal policy tools, they're bringing out everything in their economic arsenal to try to stabilize this economy. These are serious times that we're in today. Many jobs are at risk throughout America, especially if the pandemic continues. And right now, nobody really knows. But you know, when we wake up in the morning, for those of us that are working from home, like I am right now, you wake up in the morning and you're saying it's eerie how quiet it is. Kids are not running to school or being driven to school. Everybody's at home, and few people are driving on the roads. There's cleaner air. We've not seen this clean air for a long time because there's fewer cars on the roads and fewer airplanes in the air. On a positive side, families are spending more time together. They're spending less time on the road, and they're enjoying the great outdoors. How nice that we can actually still get out, practicing social distancing and other safety measures, right? Small businesses are having to reinvent themselves to survive and to thrive during this pandemic. We're retooling. We're rethinking how we work. People are saving more. They're saving for the rainy day, which is good for retirement, because most people, as they said even before this retirement happened, there was a statistic that a very few number of people had $400 to handle an emergency expense. Now people have more money. They're saving for the rainy day. This is a positive thing. We're seeing more love of neighbor and people caring for one another. I've heard a new term called caremongering, the desire to help people and to care for people, to have unity and kindness in this time of crisis. So this is a positive thing. We're learning to help each other. There's a lot of people that have lost their jobs working in city government, municipal government, as I said, because of the falling sales taxes and hotel taxes and other type of taxes and fees and assessments that have been going down. A lot of threats of pink slips being issued. Remember, pink slip means being laid off. So there's a lot of threats right now that we're facing in municipal government. But with all that sad news, there's a positive news. Where we're headed, we need to embrace the future, not to panic. If we panic, nothing good is going to come of this. Where we're headed, we're learning to use technology to bring our family and our friends together. I have so many relatives, my uncles, my parents, aunts, and cousins from all over the world, and we're connecting through something called Zoom. So technology is bringing us all together We're now also able to work remotely, and more city offices and other municipal governments are considering allowing people to work remotely because they're seeing that the productivity is there. That's still in transition, but that's something we're going to look forward to, and it's going to have to happen more and more as time goes along. So greater opportunities to work from home. You don't have to be spending money on an office, as much office space or leases and so forth. City workers and other municipal employees then have to think how to reinvent themselves. We have to work hard. There is no getting around that. We need to work hard, and we need to ask ourselves this question: what value do I bring to this organization? Remember, if we are not bringing value to the organization that we're working in, we're more likely to be cut. Regardless, I know that there are seniority, and there's bumping rights, and there's all these MOUs and so forth that you can rely on for protection, but in the end, it's just as important to focus on reinventing yourselves, on educating yourselves, training yourselves, make yourself valuable and useful and something that and somebody who's needed in your organization. Remember, mission critical operations are going to be first. In a crisis, mission critical operations need to be funded first in the budget. Obviously, public safety, police and fire, and down the line from that. So one thing that I always used to do, and I suggest for you to consider it: don't fight to keep your job. Work hard so your employer fights to keep your job. Again, I'm going to say this again. Don't fight to keep your job. Work hard so your employer fights to keep your job. We do have tough times ahead, friends, especially for those who feel entitled. I've been here so long, therefore this job is mine, is something that's going to be in question. Don't rely on the past. Look at where we are today, because really it's going to be all about solutions to problems that our cities and other municipalities are going to be looking to solve. So be open to all possibilities. Instead of spending your time binge watching Netflix, study from home, earn a certificate or even a degree to secure your future. Those who have the most skills, especially in the area of technology and using technology, will be able to beat out all the robots, all the artificial intelligence that's going to be continuing to erode the jobs that we've been used to doing. Even I, as an accountant, if artificial intelligence and algorithms can solve tax problems and accounting problems and financial reporting problems and budgeting problems, and they can perform work that I can do, eventually that's where the work's going to go. And it's no different for secretarial, engineering, administrative, and on and on and on. Technology is going to continue to compete with us as human beings. So what we need to do is to use our time, budget a certain amount of time, a reasonable amount of time, for educating yourself, to prepare yourself for the next 10, 20 years into the future. And, you know, of course you want to maintain balance. So don't burn yourself out doing any of this. It doesn't really take that much, though. So I would say that the fiscal year 2021 budget is now adopted. Most cities and other municipalities adopt their budget on July 1st. They adopted their budget on July 1st, prior to July 1st, 2020, for the fiscal year that ends June 30th, 2020. I believe that there's going to be not just a mid-year budget review for fiscal year 2021. There's going to be quarterly budget reviews and likely monthly budget reviews. Everybody's looking to see what happens with the holiday shopping season. As you know, November, December is a time when most of the retail businesses earn a big part of their annual revenue. And for retail sales and hotel sales and related taxes, everybody's going to be watching that. Come January, all bets are off. If everything is continuing to decline, again, not even to mention the COVID-19. So, as I said before, be proactive. Don't wait to be unemployed. Don't wait for help. Help yourself. I like what a colleague of mine, Patricia Drain, told me. She says, you need to rebound, refresh, and reboot yourself into a better, improved you. You can do this. And you know, with everything that we've talked about, you might still be stressed. But I want to tell you something that is a reality. If we turn a problem, which causes so much stress and releases bad stress hormones, but if we turn a problem into a challenge, yes, it's still going to be work to work through solutions to that challenge, but you're releasing more positive energy, and you're going to be focused on looking at a challenge with a solution in sight. And there are solutions to every problem. But when it comes to having a problem and we just sit there and stew about it and not do anything and not be proactive about it, that is more stressful. And those are the bad kind of stress. There's bad stress and there's good stress. So just like if you were looking at a mountain climber that's 10,000 feet up in the mountain, and he runs across this big ledge on the mountain, and he or she says, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. He's going to be stressed, and he is going to probably die. Or he could turn that problem into a challenge and say, I can do this, and looks for ways to propel himself or herself up over that ledge, and all of the hormones and all of the energy and all of the energy that their body is going to be focused on overcoming that challenge. That's good kind of stress. Just like when you're running or you're climbing or you're pushing or you're swimming or you're exerting yourself, that results in good stress. It's actually good exercise as well. But the point is that we need to continue to rebound, refresh, reboot ourselves, and look at whatever problems we're facing because of this economic recession. And rather than just sit there and let the problem happen to you, be proactive, because some of the best ideas, some of the best opportunities are found in times of adversity, in times of challenge. And I know we're going to get through this. Everything will be okay. I know that. We've been through this before. Maybe not as bad as what we're facing right now. But again, this is no time to rest on our laurels. This is a time to be proactive and look at how much you can achieve if you believe in yourself and you work hard to not just survive, but thrive during this COVID-19 crisis and turn the bad stress into good stress. And I hope that this has been helpful to you. I really appreciate the opportunity to visit with you here today. And please call me, John, John. Email me, John, John, at munitemps.com, MUNITMPS.com, or call me or go to munitemps.com. You can get all my contact information there. I'd love to talk to you and interact and talk about different ideas. I've been a finance director. I've prepared almost 30 annual city budgets. So I'd love to give you ideas on how you can not just, again, survive, but thrive during this next recession that we don't know how long it'll take to get out, but we will survive. We've done it before. All right, very good. This is John Herrera, thanking you for being with me here this afternoon, and I wish you well. Have a good one. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the CitySpeak podcast. Tune in next time where we will talk again about everything relevant to stakeholders at City Hall and municipal government organizations.